I'm delighted that we here have at our festival Eric Corijn, who knows a hell of a lot about Can Cities Save Democracy and democracy in general. He's Professor of Urban Studies at the Vrije Universiteit in Brussels, but also importantly co-founder of Cosmopolis, the Centre for Urban Research. And additionally, he's more than just someone who thinks about things. He's very active. He's an activist, particularly in the Global Parliament of Mayors. And the Global Parliament of Mayors is really trying to say there needs to be a completely new contract between cities and the state. So it's very much his big topic. So, Eric, over to you. Give us your views and how we can save democracy, please.
Thank you, Charles, for this introduction. Well, that the world has fundamentally changed over the last 30, 40 years is generally accepted. We are now in a globalized world. We are not just in a world of nation states that contain the whole economy and society. We are now in a connected, interdependent world. But in that transition, in that change, what is underestimated as a fact is urbanization. Most of the humans are now living in an urban context, and in the most developed continents, that is up to 3/4 of the population. The post-Fordist, post-industrial society, service society, is developing in cities. Cities are the nodes of the space of flows in the global system. And so, in fact, society is changing from a national society to a globalized urban society. And that makes society much more complex and locates, I think, the question of governance, the question of democracy, the question of co-production of society much more in cities and metropolitan areas than it was in the 19th century when democracy was invented, you could say, and developed in the format of the nation state. And cities are a specific form of society because, in fact, it is a society of newcomers, of people with their roots elsewhere. There is hardly a small part of urban society that is rooted for generations in that place. City is, in fact, a type of society built on migrants, internal national migrants coming from the surrounding hinterland of cities, but also international migrants. And so my thesis is that on the one hand, we see that nation states tend to develop to more authoritarian, more administrative, less democratic forms of governance, and that there is an increasing trend of fundamentalism, of extreme right pressure on the nation states, whereas at the other hand, democracy is needed and has to be deepened even to govern cities. What is the big challenges we are living with in this global system? I see three big fields of concern. On the one hand, our relationship with nature. That is, of course, global warming, the climate change, but also the questions of biodiversity, of our ecological footprint, of health, of food production. In other words, I think we have to reconsider fundamentally our economic system, the way to organize our survival. The second big field, of course, globally, is the increase of social inequality. And that is not only the increase of the tension between the global north and the global south, but within each city, you have a deepening of a two-tier society where 1/3, more or less, of the population, or even more, is excluded of normal integration in society and in the economy. And the third big field, of course, is living together on the basis of difference, living together with diversity. And diversity is not only a question of social difference, it's also a question of language, of religion, of multiplicity, of origins. And so these three challenges occur everywhere in the world, but occur in a different, specific way. So we are not going to solve them globally with the same recipes, with the same policies. We have to make a local diagnosis. We have to land somewhere in a literal way. We have to land to make them. And I do think that cities as nodal points in that global system are the places to rethink and deepen democracy. And to argue for that, I have to underline one of my basic theses. A city is not a country. Cohesion and citizenship in a country is based on a narrative, on a story of a common history, of tradition, of identity. And people have to assimilate, to include in that historic, great historic narrative. And that can be represented and is also territorially bounded. Now, a city where people are coming from all over the place, from different places, it is not a common history that is going to stick people together. Cities are living with difference, are segmented, are fragmented, different histories, different traditions. They only can be brought together in a common destiny, in a destination, in a futures project. And so, whereas, let's say, cohesion in a country comes from the past, cohesion in a city comes from the future, from a futures project that is hybrid, that is based on mixity, on combination, and that is also much more networked and not territorially bounded. And that leads us to some considerations on leading and administering a city that is of a completely different kind than governing a country. What we see happening is that local politicians, local managers, in fact, are much more pragmatic, much less ideological, much less segmented also, and much more oriented to problem solving. So let me, to finish, name a few implications for city governance and deepening democracy at that level. The first question we have to deal with in each city is the question of scale. At what scale, let's say, the locality matters? And in my research, I have to see that it is always bigger than the municipality. The actual existing borders of the city do not include the local ecosystem. The local ecosystem, that is local resources, that is connectivity at the level of nature, of resources, of underground, etc. So where do we have to locate reconsidering democracy? It's always in a collaboration between the city and its immediate hinterland. It's at the metropolitan scale that we have to think governance and democracy. The second big element is that it's a different kind of politics. So we have to restructure urban politics. In general, we could say from ideology to visioning. It's much more pragmatic, it's much more problem solving, it is much more oriented to transition policies and not just to management of the existence. And that needs fundamental changes in the organization of local administration. The administration has to evolve from sector, from segmented topics, in fact, toward much more transversal, project-oriented management. So departmentalism doesn't address interwoven problems. What we have to do is to fix organization forms where administrators of different topics can collaborate each time there is a problem that is raised and a transition that has to be managed. And that also leads us to another element of administration. In fact, the shift from governance from government to governance. In fact, a mayor is not, let's say, the boss of the city. He's not because he is elected, he is in charge of everything. He's the leader of urban society. And so we have to collaborate with civil society. We have to manage problems always in collaboration with actors in society. The mayor is a leader, is a director, much more than a chief, than a boss. Finally, we have to see also that the urban system does not just consist of a relationship between the state, between government and the market. That private operation is also organized in a civil society, and that civil society matters in a city very much. The commons, collaboration, solidarity mechanisms within society are very important to raise awareness of cohesion in the city. And so we have to think of rebuilding another type of equilibrium in our liberal democracies, in fact, between market, the commons, and the authorities and the administration, and to build them together in development coalitions at the level of neighborhoods, at the level of districts, at city level, and even on metropolitan level. And all that finally includes, of course, the importance of visioning, of imagination, of projecting a future, a common future together. And that means that culture, education, mobilization, participation of the population is very important, and to mobilize all local resources, in fact, in building the city. And so essential economy, foundational economy, is the basis of the city. That is not to be relocalized, that is not in competition with other cities, basically, but that is in fact reproducing daily life in a city. And if we can increase the quality and the surplus value production within the local economy in a circular way based on local resources, I think we will increase also participation and adhesion. So I really think that urbanity is a post-national way of socializing. And I think that the post-COVID situation will put all these points really at the center in the agenda. In my view, deepening democracy, another form of democracy, much more co-productive, with much more participation, is the typical form of good urban governance. And I do think that we go in an era of even tension and conflict between, on the one hand, national and international bureaucratic systems of governance and the participation that we see locally. And I think that is a central part in our agenda.
Well, Eric, thank you so much. You really highlighted some very, very big issues. And I think one of the biggest is this whole thing between the market and the commons, which is a completely different conception of operating a world. And I suppose what I think really one of the key messages is that thing about the gathering force of the nation is based around common joint traditions, in a sense, and that distinction you made about in the city, which is so mixed and so on, that you really have to create that destiny, which is a common co-created future. So look, thank you very much for that. And what more can I say? That was great. Thank you very much, and speak soon.